Iranian Affairs analyst, joining me now live from Tehran. So let's talk about the Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. One of the things we do know about Raisi is, like the supreme leader that he is closely aligned with, he is in favor of it. However, when we hear him speak, he wants to emphasize that he wants to see all U.S. sanctions lifted, which is very unlikely to happen unless Iran changes some of its behaviors. So what do you think about the prospects at this point for the JCPOA to ride again?
Hello, and thanks for having me. Well, the foreign policy of Mr. Raisi, as he said it today and was clear earlier, at least for the past several months, comes on the basis of a strategy that unfortunately Iran has done its best in the past 20 years to remove the sanctions, and détente with the United States or the U.S. The issue with the U.S. has been at the focus of attention of Iran, and apparently Iran has not done enough to expand ties with the outside world. This would help Iran in the nuclear case as well. The plan is, under Rouhani, the only instrument was negotiation with the United States to resolve the problems and remove all the sanctions. But now that the U.S. remains adamant, because it has never been willing to resolve the conflicts with Iran, it's just been looking for talks in a bit to contain Iran. So the strategy has been containment, not a conflict resolution. Raisi has a more complicated plan to push the U.S. to shift its strategy from containment to conflict resolution. This means that negotiation would remain an option, an instrument in future, of course, but it's not going to be as important as before, as heavy as before, as a means, as a tool in Iran's foreign policy, especially with regard to the United States. As a complementary step, Raisi is going to first diffuse the U.S. sanctions, and they have a detailed planning for that. That includes reinvigorating and activating domestic economic potentials, expanding ties with the regional states, including Turkey, Qatar, and many others, and also Latin America, China, as a third step of the expanding strategic cooperation with those countries that are outside the region and are powers like China, Russia, Latin America, and elsewhere. So this is going to be a second step that will be conducted alongside talks to defuse the U.S. weapon of choice, the sanctions. A third step that comes in parallel is increasing the leverages against the United States, and Iran has a wide array of options to increase the pressure on the United States. It's not going to be limited to the nuclear field and capability or the military capability. Iran has so many other options in other areas to force the United States shift its strategy from containment to conflict resolution.
So the 60-year-old Raisi has a background in law. He was a longtime prosecutor. He emphasized the importance of the rule of law. However, he has sanctions on him. He also has been linked, according to human rights watchers, to mass executions in the late 1980s. Tell me a little bit about that, and does that matter to Iranians?
You know, they don't have anything strong on him. The issue with those executions 3 decades ago, they were given fair trial first time, and Raisi gave him a second trial. But it needs elaboration, and I know you're short of time. The point is in here is that the United States and Western organizations, depending on the West or on the UN, they are using human rights, democracy, and legitimacy as a means and instrument to tarnish as well as hamper their rivals. Otherwise, they would have, done something to Saudi Arabia's crown prince. And at least in the case of Jamal Khashoggi that they butchered, they would have done lots of things to their own officials because of their notorious crimes in Abu Ghraib and elsewhere, and they have done nothing. You know, Amnesty that has raised the claims, it's ridiculous that a few years ago they invited Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State of the United States, as a keynote speaker to an Amnesty International event, and it was there that Madeleine Albright stressed that the U.S. sanctions on Iraq that killed 500,000 children, women, and men were worth it. And that was astounding how a keynote speaker at the Amnesty International says such a thing, and she's been invited to that event. It shows that for them, the end justifies the means. So if they see that Raisi is moving ahead despite, in opposition to their plans, they would use it, they would use all their media capability in order to run smear campaign, to tarnish, hamper, and block his progress as a revolutionary president. They would do their best. Otherwise, I believe they would not deal with this, what they are claiming about Raisi very often. Right now, they are, cautious. They talk about it. The governments in the West, the Europeans, they talk about it, but they never say that it's going to, block his visits to their countries. They are not going to boycott anyone in here for those allegations because they want to see what happens in politics. Politics for them is more important than human rights and whatever. These are just campaign, slogans that they run. In the meantime, let's remember that our foreign minister, Mr. Zarif, is already under heavy sanctions, but he's been on a tour of Europe and Asia and elsewhere for months, and nobody cares about those sanctions. It depends on Mr. Raisi. He's a powerful man. He's got a lot to talk about, when dealing with foreign policy. We need to see his trajectory. Maybe he could use this powerful image in, when dealing with his agenda and progressing his agenda.
Right. Seyed, thank you for that.